So recently I've had the blessing of discovering this. It's the map of consciousness. Now let me run through with you a little bit just so you can give you a clear understanding. So on the top axis we have all of the different names of the feelings. Obviously what name of the level, the energetic log, predominant state, view of life, God view, process. But then as you can see down the side here, we have different feelings that you will feel throughout stages in your life. We can go from shame to guilt, to pride to courage, to acceptance, to joy to peace. The reason why I'm talking about this and the reason why I've named the title of the video what it is because of this part here, courage. And its energetic log being around 200. The reason why it stood out so much to me is because I want you to sit there for a moment. I want you to think about moments in your life where things have really drastically changed for the better. And for the most part, it's come from you doing stuff when you're scared. And it's kind of you pushing that boundary a little bit. As we can see on this map, there is a line that is drawn between the survival paradigm and the reason and integrity section. Okay? And I'll explain this real quick. The energetic log, the numbers that we have down the side that range from 20 to 700 to 1,000, they're not linear. So let's say you have fear, which has an energetic log of 100, right? 200 isn't merely double. But 200 courage isn't merely double that of fear. It's actually, let's say fear is 10 to the power of 2, right? Courage would be 10 to the power of 3. And then reason would be 10 to the power of 4. So it's non-linear, meaning that it's exponential. So what I'm getting at here is you want to make your life different. You want to improve your life. You want to, get better things. You want to get a girlfriend. You want to be successful. You want to break your addictions. Well, if we look at all the levels in the survival paradigm, being pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame, these are all very negative feelings. These are all things that keep you down and keep you in that kind of, that rut, that spiral, those periods, perhaps you're in this now, perhaps you feel one of these. These things keep you down and they don't allow you to operate from a higher level. And the reason why I want to focus on courage is because as soon as you get to that 200 mark, you create a division between you and that survival paradigm. You create a division between you and those depressed feelings. And it makes me, I think back to times in my life in particular, like I've been addicted to ketamine, been addicted to weed, to porn, to video games. I've been afraid to talk to women. I've been afraid to take risks. And I realised in every single one of these moments where my life improved, it required me to have courage. Like a lot of the time, for example, right, when I was single, I thought I was ugly. Like I genuinely thought I was ugly, right? And I had crushed some girls as girls that I wanted to talk to, but I was so stricken from fear, which has an energy log of 100. I was so anxious that I was kind of kept down into these lower energy levels. But the moment that I had courage, I displayed something courageous, which is courage is basically action in the face of fear. It's basically saying, look, I'm not going to let fear define me. The moment I had courage and decided to go talk to the girl no matter what, my perception of myself changed. It made me realise that I'm capable. Perhaps at the moment you feel shameful because you're watching porn, or you feel guilty because you've got an addiction, or you feel apathetic because you don't know what you're doing with your life, or you feel grief because you've made a bad decision, or you've lost someone, or you feel fearful about the future, or you're craving something, or you feel angry over yourself, or perhaps you feel prideful. You're capable of moving out of these negative feelings. And, since I've been really practicing this map of consciousness stuff, I really realized there's actually a lot of merit to it. I've been deliberately trying to act in a way which is more courageous, which is more loving and accepting, and I've actually noticed that my reception from the world is better. Now, whether or not you believe this, it doesn't really matter, but I think there's a benefit to it. When someone walks into a room and they're really miserable, and you can always be like, oh, it feels like they've got a dark cloud around them. That's energy, and you can feel that energy. But then we contrast that with someone who's just for some fucking reason always so happy all the time. Though that person seems like you can't knock them down, right? Whereas the person who's already negative, you can knock them down more, you can piss them off more. But the person who's in a good mood, they're unshakable. And the point that I'm getting at is the person who's in a really good state of being versus the person who's in a bad state of being. The person who's in a good state of being can't be knocked down because their energy levels, as displayed from the map, are more powerful. Perhaps at the moment you're wanting to change your life. Perhaps at the moment you hate the way you look, right? And you want to really step into the gym and you really want to take bodybuilding seriously. Not even compete, but just look better. It takes courage to walk into the gym. It takes courage to admit that you don't know what you're on about. You know, it takes courage to go up to someone and say, listen, I need help. You know, perhaps you wanted to start posting to social media, or perhaps you want to quit your job, or perhaps you want to go talk to that girl, or perhaps you want to, you know, try sell something to someone. All of these things you have to do in the face of fear. I think fear, especially as young men, right, it's one of these things that hold us down more than anything else. Guys nowadays are so anxious about everything, right? They're so worried about the future, they're so conscious about themselves, and they're getting stuck in these survival paradigms, and they can never get themselves out of it. And it's really noticeable. And the only way that people end up getting out of this stuff is through temporary escape. So we have things like drinking, where it kind of nullifies all these bad feelings. And this is why, for example, guys get drunk confidence so they can go talk to their girl or that girl, because they no longer have that fear blocking them. Or, you know, or if they get a heightened sense of status from buying a nice car or going on holiday or doing something which is just, it's meaningless. You know, stuff that doesn't really, it's not long standing. I think it's a massive epidemic, maybe not just in men, but just in people in general. So many people are kind of like caught down in these lower feelings, and I think there's genuinely massive merit to acting in a more positive manner. Because if we look at the qualities, you know, optimism, forgiveness, harmonious, hopeful, inspiring, release, all these things, they're really positive. And if we contrast them with evil, vindictive, hopeless, disdainful, you know, your outlook on life is really going to change the trajectory of your life. So perhaps if you're someone who's lost at the moment, right? Perhaps if you're someone who's lost at the moment and you're not really sure what you want to do with your life, there's merit to you having the courage to walk away from these negative feelings. And even though you feel like you're in the darkness, it's worth it to act courageous, because to try and be in a higher state of being. Because I've noticed from my literally like a week's worth of me trying this, the moment I actually start stepping into these higher energy logs, obviously you're not going to be in them all the time, it's not what I'm talking about, but the moment I was capable of actually stepping into these higher energy logs, I noticed that they kind of feed into each other. Like, you know how when a group of people are together and they're all miserable, and then they kind of feed into that misery? Well, if you put yourself into a high state of being and you keep doing that, you keep like spreading that, it actually amps you up. So the thing that I challenge you with right now is, you know, you say to yourself you're lost, you're sad, you're confused with what you want to do with life. Perhaps the reason you are like that is because you haven't taken a bet on yourself. You know, you've kind of allowed yourself to feel these negative emotions for way too long. Because I get it, it's very stimulating, but by doing so, you're actually limiting your own energy potential, because there's only so much you can do with these feelings, right? Eventually, you need something more positive to be able to push you out. It's like, for example, you can have two people working the same, like, minimum wage job, right? Or like a dead-end job working in like a petrol station or a gas station for you Americans. You can have two people working the same job, but one person is going to view it in a great light and get a lot from it, versus you have other people who just hate it and they just like shit on it all the time. I actually had this with my previous job. So I started working in a gym now, which is an absolute blessing, and I'm really grateful for it. But previously I was working in the co-op, and you know what, like the co-op is like, for those of you who don't know, it's basically just like a small like convenience store, right, all throughout the UK. And I was at the one in my village, and a lot of the people there are kind of there because they've got nothing better to do. That's the way I would describe it, in the most respectful way possible. A lot of people there don't have direction in their lives, or it's kind of like an end of the road job. It's like with old women. There's a lot of older women who work there, and they just do it just to get a little bit of extra money. And what I observed is the majority of the people there were operating in these lower spheres. And I think as a result of that, they've made their lives miserable. Because when you attach these lower energies to something such as your workplace, you then have, and if you're going to your workplace 5 days a week, you're then entering that lower energy sphere for basically your entire life. Versus myself, where I was actually kind of, I made the most of the situation that I was in, right? Some people could say a 23-year-old being in a minimum wage job is bad, but I was opportunistic about it. And as a result of it, I was happy and I was fine with it. I just want to apply this to you because I think there's levels and there's places in your life that you need to address. There's things you need to kind of audit within yourself and say, maybe I'm not being positive in the right way. Maybe I am being a little bit too apathetic, or maybe I'm a bit too fearful. Maybe I should have more courage. Because remember, look at the red line. Courage is the moment we start to step into a higher energy log, meaning that the actual power that you have is so much more significant. You know, the more you can actually start to channel these better energies, I think the better your life will be. It's something for you to consider. Perhaps at this state you find yourself in where you're kind of a little bit down and you're a little bit low. Maybe switching up your mindset towards it and trying to see everything in this peachy way is going to make your life a little bit better. Maybe you should stop consuming so much social media. Maybe you should stop doing things that make you dislike yourself, because the longer you keep doing these things, the harder it's going to be to change your life. Because if you're doing stuff that you don't like, that make you not like yourself, if you're consuming content that makes you dislike who you are, how are you supposed to improve yourself? You're not. Because if you're constantly feeding yourself low energy stuff, you're going to get stuck in these lower levels. And when you get stuck in these lower levels, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to grow and to flourish and to become better. So, yeah, just a bit of food for thought.